This is how Bill Burr destroys Bill Maher on his own show.
Boston, you may have heard, is a college town. There's quite a few intellectuals there. The audience that's very sophisticated, they like my show. Okay, we all have our niche.
Oh, God, you're so fucking highbrow.
Well, it's true.
Does your jokes float above ours?
A little bit.
One of the best things you did for society is you didn't have kids.
If you are unaware, Bill Burr recently made an appearance on Bill Maher's show called the Club Random Podcast. And in this podcast, they had a conversation about many different topics spanning nearly all of the strata of controversy you could possibly imagine. They talk about things like cancel culture, Israel-Palestine, the Russia-Ukraine war, and many other controversial issues, and Bill Burr does what he does best and absolutely lays into Bill Maher when he gives a take or says something that is profoundly out of touch in the best way possible. I'd actually say that the dynamic between the Bills was quite fun to listen to despite Bill Maher's very apparent pretentiousness, because it's balanced out perfectly by Billy Twinkletoes Burr's playful jabs. Bill Burr has built a massive reputation online for being the guy that will tell you how it is and will bust your balls if you ask him a stupid question or try to make fun of him.
Your Christian background is part of the show. Or
yes, and I wanted to talk to you about Jesus after this.
Well, the only reason why I bring it up is some people thought maybe you went a little too far.
Don't you think the Catholic Church went a little too far? More so than my cartoon.
All right, listen.
A couple of jokes. I know this is a morning show. You can't bring up all those crimes.
You know what?
So if you're curious about how the Bill Burr episode went with Bill Maher and some of the funniest moments from the podcast, and also how it was that Bill Burr destroys Bill Maher and put a spotlight on just how out of touch he has become, then you've come to the right place. I will be talking about all of that in today's video, so if that sounds interesting to you, let's hop right into it and get down to the nitty-gritty details. To begin with, if you aren't super familiar with Bill Maher, or you haven't watched him for an extended period of time, he started out his career as an observational comedian. He actually had some good stand-up when he was much younger, and he did late-night talk shows like Johnny Carson, but as he got more famous, he focused less on what it took to be funny and more on what it took to be seen as an intellectual giant. More on that later, but as he got more famous, a lot of people surmised with some of his political stances that he had become an arrogant, out-of-touch douchebag who had his head so far up his own ass you'd think he was trying to wear it as a hat. Then on the other hand, you have Bill Burr, who despite many people saying his wife has changed him a lot and made him a lot softer, has always been well known for pressing people and busting their balls, especially when they have an attitude like this. I would say that Bill Burr is a fairly down-to-earth guy who admits to his audience he isn't super well read, and that if you met him in person and treated him respectfully, he would probably give you back the same level of respect no matter who you were. Maybe he'd bust your balls or tease you a little bit, but that's besides the point. Whereas Bill Maher to a lot of people comes off as the complete opposite, especially with a lot of his videos online dunking on people from his show, Real Time with Bill Maher. He also postures himself as an intellectual who has the answers and solutions for a lot of deeply complex issues across the world. So these two guys meeting would certainly yield a fair amount of discourse and ribbing from Bill Burr himself. And it did absolutely that on their episode of Club Random that was released recently on May 12th, 2024. Also, I will admit that while Bill Burr casually destroys Bill Maher is a pretty good sport about it the whole time, so it never really escalates past some friendly banter. There are so many moments on here that became instant classics on the long list of Bill Burr roasts. For example, there was one point where Bill Maher is talking about the city of Boston and also the intelligence of people who listen to him, and subtly implying that they're more sophisticated if they listen to him than they would be listening to somebody like Bill Burr. And Bill responds to this with a nice cooking of the absolute pretentiousness of this statement. I'll show you that part now.
Boston, you may have heard, is a college town. There's quite a few intellectuals there. The audience that's very sophisticated, they like my show. Okay, we all have our niche.
Oh, God, you're so fucking highbrow.
Well, it's true.
Does your jokes float above ours?
A little bit.
Why, because you say Setmet tank or something? You have, this is a hacky reference, but you totally have the energy of, you forgot to give out the homework assignment, Mrs.
I have a love affair with the Boston audience. We are like this because they're just very smart. What can I tell you? I know you hate to hear that.
It sounds like you have a gig coming up in Boston and the tickets are a little slow.
No, they're never slow in Boston.
This was a really funny moment to see. Bill Maher made sure to laser focus on how there's smart people in Boston and how they also tend to like his show, and then Bill Burr just lampoons him and brings him back down a little closer to earth. Norm Macdonald has talked about Bill Maher before with Larry King, and I think he nails the type of performer Bill is. I'll show you that right here.
A comedian, what he should be doing is being funny. That should be his goal, to be funny. I feel some comedians, their goal is to be smart. And the funny is like a collateral thing. Your friend Bill Maher, for instance, you know, he wants to be seen as an intellectual.
Dennis Miller.
Nobody likes a guy smarter than them. That's the worst guy you can be. A guy smarter than the audience. They're gonna hate you.
I really think he hit the bullseye here on Bill Maher. A comedian's main job is to go on stage and to be funny. Nothing more and nothing less. A lot of comedians pride themselves on being observational and pointing out interesting or quirky things about the world we live in, and within that, you can give some of your own thoughts and personal point of view. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that as long as the funniness and the jokes continue to take the precedence. The problem becomes when being seen as smart or like you have the solutions to every complex issue on the planet starts to come before being funny, and at that point you're just yapping more than you are telling jokes. Jerry Seinfeld also did an interview where he talks about the tiptoe as someone who does observational comedy and how your job is always first and foremost to be funny. I'll show you that clip right now.
There's this little thing of I want to say this and I want to be funny, and that little balance.
Right.
If it's 1 inch above, I really want to say this, and it's not that funny, the audience will they will recoil instantly. It's like you're preaching, or you're trying to make some stupid point.
Right.
You know, and funny. But if it's always, this is really funny, and it says something, then you're okay.
Yeah, which is fine if you're a preacher. But if you're advertised as a comedian, you have to be sure you're getting laughs at what you're saying.
This is a very straightforward point that even if you don't like Jerry Seinfeld, you can more than likely find yourself agreeing with. Being funny always trumps being smart, but to some comedians, they think it's the complete opposite. Those are the types of comedians who maybe initially were funny while being observational, who then evolve into out-of-touch pseudo-intellectuals that drive a lot of regular people crazy. Which reminds me of another part of this podcast where Bill Maher talks about kids on college campuses who are assembling and taking part in political protests, and the whole time he's doing it, he props himself up as the really brave person with his own opinion on the war, like some type of underdog figure. I'll show you that now.
Have you heard what's going on college campuses these days?
I don't watch the news.
You don't realize that college campuses erupted with the kids demonstrating for Hamas? They are in with the terrorists.
They were for the Palestinians. I'm on the side of the kids.
Yeah, that's easy to say. You know, no one wants to see kids dead. This is a war.
That was very brave of you to say that.
This is a war. No, I'm the one who's actually brave on this.
Pat yourself on the back.
It's easy to say I'm for the kids. Who's not for the kids?
Well,
it comes down to real hard-nosed decisions. Like a country.
Stop talking like you're a general.
A country got attacked. Israel got attacked.
I'm not saying that they didn't have a right to go back. I'm just sitting there going like, how do I look at
We're the only country in the world that they get attacked, and then as soon as they counterattack, it's like, well, we got to stop this now. Don't attack them. There's a very simple solution to all this problem in the Middle East. Stop attacking Israel.
Hey, you
Stop
just solved
attacking
it.
Israel.
You just solved it.
I actually did.
There you go. That's fantastic.
Anyway.
All right.
We don't need to get onto that.
Let's go to Russia and the Ukraine. How do you solve that one, Bill? Let me hear your hard-nosed decision about that.
I love Bill's comment about how Bill Maher was like patting himself on the back for this opinion. I also love how when Bill Maher says people in the Middle East shouldn't start conflicts with Israel, that Bill playfully agrees and says, there you go, you just solved the problem. And then he proceeds to ask him about another war and why that one's happening and how that one should be solved. I don't really care what you believe about the war, I just thought the way that Bill Burr brought Bill Maher back down to earth was very funny, and then him playfully confronting him again on a different war this time led to an even funnier moment, and I'll show that part right now.
Well, let me ask you a question. How is war still legal? With all this that's been canceled.
Legal.
Why is that still fucking legal?
Would you like a real answer to that? Because for something to be illegal, you have to have the capacity to enforce it. And you can't enforce against war, or else you have to go to war with the country that's going to war. What would be the sense of making it illegal? Oh, that's really going to stop Putin. No. To stop people from going to war, you have to also put
You can't sit down and talk it out. Why can't Putin do a podcast with the head guy? Like, you just solved the Middle East on a podcast. Why can't they solve what they're doing on a podcast?
This is why this is not your thing.
Make some hard-nosed decisions. It's not your thing. It's what you...
It is my thing.
It isn't your thing.
This is not your thing.
You're like that guy that has a fantasy football team and thinks he's a fucking GM.
No.
That's exactly what it is. Like, why am I fucking listening to you like you've done something? What have you done in Washington? Nothing.
No, I would never go to Washington.
It's beneath you.
Absolutely hilarious. Bill Maher himself can't even help but laugh at the way that Bill compared him to somebody who owns a fantasy football team. A super great analogy for the situation at hand. This clip was interesting because Bill Burr starts this part off by saying war shouldn't be legal because a bunch of people die and no one really wins in the end. A very broad and agreeable point. And then Bill Maher has to come in and valiantly lead us to the conclusion that he has as to why war still happens, as if we don't already know. He also makes a point to say this is why he does what he does and why Bill Burr doesn't do that type of comedy. Once again, whether you disagree with Bill Maher's point or not, doesn't change the pretentious way of presenting this information he partakes in that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. Another part of the interview I thought was really funny was when Bill Burr talks about flying Southwest Airlines still, and Bill Maher seems to be genuinely surprised by this answer since he flies on a private jet. I'll show you that part here.
Bow, you fucking get off your little private jet. I have a TV show.
Oh, and you travel Southwest, is that right, Bill?
I love Southwest.
Really?
I love the order.
Is that how you travel?
I love Southwest.
Do you travel commercial?
Most of the time, yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Commercial?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Bigger plane, better pilots. You don't get knocked around as much. You ride in a fucking Cadillac. The only thing that sucks about commercial is boarding.
I'm still stuck on you defending
Stuck on you.
Still stuck on you defending commercial flights as better. Now, you can make the case that it's wrong to fly private. I get that. But I've never heard anyone make the case that it's actually better to be on Delta. No?
Oh, no, I hate Delta.
Bill Maher just can't wrap his head around the fact that us poor pieces of shit don't want to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to fly private from one state to the next, and some of us might actually enjoy flying commercial airlines. What the hell? He's seriously so shocked that Bill Burr flies commercial airlines, and it's hilarious to see. Later on, while they're still talking about airlines, Bill Maher legitimately calls Bill Burr dumb for liking commercial better than private. I'm not even joking. Let me show you the clip.
Delta's the fucking worst.
I bet you fly private more than you're letting on.
Listen, if I have to go somewhere and I don't have enough time to get there...
Oh, suddenly we've got an exception.
No, I said mainly I fly commercial.
Well, you're an idiot. You shouldn't.
What is this? If I don't agree with you, I'm an idiot.
You're right. I apologize.
Fucking John Varvatos shirt. You're not young. Put on a sweater, for fuck's sake.
He actually calls Bill Burr an idiot for him liking commercial airlines better than flying private. That's so funny to me. I also love how Bill starts to complain about Delta Airlines, which is something a lot of regular people could absolutely relate to, and Bill Maher is still just flabbergasted by him flying commercial airlines. Then after that, Bill Burr cooks him again and makes fun of his shirt. Another part that makes you realize how out of touch Bill Maher was when him and Bill discussed the concept of cancel culture, and they actually ended up agreeing on the fact that what Louis C.K. went through was a lot, and it was probably a little too much. The part after this, though, is where he completely loses me because he goes on to say that cancel culture still has all of this power and that him and Bill Burr could be affected by it in the next 2 minutes.
Isn't it time everyone just went, okay, it wasn't a cool thing to do, but it's been long enough, and welcome back to the world.
You took $50 million from him. I think they punished him. It just spun out of... I remember whenever that cancel culture got to the point of where it was, I don't like some of the topics in your not act.
Right.
Yeah, that's when it got weird. But like, that's all over.
Cancel culture?
Yeah, no one cares anymore.
That's so not true. Either one of us could get canceled in the next 2 minutes.
No. For what?
Bill Maher is the last person that should be worried about cancel culture. I mean, dude, unless you go on InfoWars and praise the mustache man, who I'm not even going to dignify him by saying his name, but I think you know who I'm talking about. Unless you do that, you have nothing to worry about. I mean, dude, you have millions and millions of dollars. You have a TV show on HBO. You have a massively successful podcast. If you make a joke that somebody doesn't like, Bill, what could they possibly do to cancel you? Not much. I'm not saying that it doesn't still exist in some small ways, but I do think that propping up cancel culture as the boogeyman for comedians still is very unnecessary for the most part. Another part that really made me laugh was when Bill Burr said that one of the best things Bill Maher has ever done for society is not having kids.
One of the best things you did for society is you didn't have kids.
Well,
you know?
thank you. I know you meant that in a snarky way.
We need more people like you.
We do.
That can just admit that I don't want to deal with this
Absolutely hilarious. Now, I know so far most of this video has been us teasing and laughing at Bill Maher, but there's a part of the podcast where Bill Maher actually explains exactly why Bill Burr became popular and is successful, and it's actually very insightful the way he points it out. I'll show you that here.
Like 21 felt old to me then. And I was like, what am I doing? You know, I'm going part-time to college, I'm unloading trucks, and I'm getting shit-faced, and I'm broke every Thursday waiting for my check.
That is what has made you the guy who sells stadiums, which is very, very few comics. But it all comes from you are an everyman. Every crate you lifted, all that stuff, they see in you. And you're, of course, very funny and great at your craft, but like there is a emotional connection.
What I thought was interesting about this is how aware of this Bill Maher is, yet I'd say he himself has become very distant from the everyman that he once embodied when he was an observational comedian who focused more on being funny than being smart. I understand it's probably harder to be an everyman when you really start to see the money stack up sky high, but I feel like it's possible for someone to do it when someone like Theo Vaughn or Bill Burr, despite becoming massively successful, has still for the most part sustained their likability aura that they've always had since they started comedy decades ago. When I initially saw clips of this podcast out of context, it looked like Bill Burr was just trashing Bill Maher and that he might have even been a bit put off by him. But when you watch the whole podcast, I think the dynamic they have is actually quite interesting, and it benefits Bill Maher a lot to have somebody like Bill Burr there to check him when he gets a little too smug or egotistical. I know Bill Maher is definitely out of touch and is more focused on being seen as smart than funny, but I do think having someone like Bill Burr on his pod was a great adjustment for him to help keep him a little bit more grounded, and that I would not mind seeing them do another episode on Club Random together sometime in the future. It was actually refreshing to see Bill Maher laugh at himself after some of the roasts Bill gave him, and I'd even co-sign seeing Bill Maher on the Monday Morning Podcast alongside Billy Burr. Anyway, what did you guys think about the podcast with Bill Maher and Bill Burr? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you think Bill went a little too easy on him? Or do you think that Bill might actually have some reserved resentment towards Bill and he's cloaking it with these little remarks? I'll let you decide in the comments down below. Also, if you like the Bill Burr content, I made a video here about my theory on why the Bill Burr podcast ended. If you haven't watched it yet, I'd highly recommend doing it because there's a rumor that if you haven't watched this video on my channel yet, that you're gay. So definitely click the video right now if you're not gay and watch it. And if you've already seen the video, you might want to double check it and rewatch it just to make sure you're definitely not gay. Alright, I'm just kidding. If you guys liked the video, make sure to leave me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Also, check out the Patreon if you want to see some bonus content. I recently opened for my good friend Jeff Dye at 2 sold-out theater shows, which was my first time ever doing stand-up comedy in a theater, and I have the tape of me doing stand-up on there if you'd like to see it. But all in all, this was how Bill Burr destroys Bill Maher on his own show.
Hey, you're not going to believe this, but Bill Maher is giving away the solution to all our problems for free. He is, isn't he?